Sounds good.
All right, and welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Bob Gaudio. He's an attorney,
Yes.
a musician,
Yep.
an actor,
Yeah.
one time a restaurateur,
Yes.
and a father, and a new grandfather as of today.
Yes. We had.
Tell him about the baby.
We had. Our family. My son Nathan and his lovely wife Amanda had a daughter today. This afternoon at 12:10. This is April the 20th.
Congratulations.
And yes, Isabel Rain Gaudio, because when she was being born, which she was 6 weeks premature, it was pounding with rain outside of McGee Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh, and they were originally going to call the child Isabel June because she was supposed to be born in June. And rather than calling her June, they decided to call her Isabel Rain. So she is Isabel Rain Gaudio, and she's a healthy, little, tiny, premature baby hanging out at McGee Women's Hospital this evening. And we're very, very happy, Claire and I, and everybody in the family is just beside themselves with happiness that she's healthy. Amanda's great, and Nathan is just over the moon, so it's a lot of fun. Thank you for the congratulations.
Oh, you're welcome.
And
also joining us is the
Yes.
lovely Miss Claire.
Claire
Bob's
McDonald,
wife.
my wife Claire McDonald, yes.
And we just had a delicious dinner, and I had pasta for the first time in a while, and it was well worth the calories. It was delicious.
We apologize for ruining your diet.
No apologies necessary. It was well worth it.
Thank you.
It was delicious. So before we started recording, you had mentioned that you went to law school later in life.
Yes.
So let's just jump into that, because I was curious about that when you brought it up earlier.
A great story. I was going through a divorce, and the divorce strung out over many years. We had 2 children together when we were married, and the divorce went on and on and on through the Allegheny County court system in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we came to a point where we were divorced, but we were then battling over child support and child rearing and that sort of thing. And we were in front of a judge in Allegheny County, and he basically came to the point where he came out one day and he said that today will be the last day of this case. I had written a response brief because I had fired 3 divorce attorneys prior to getting to this point in time, and I'd written a response brief against my then ex-wife's attorney, who wanted me to pay additional child support, and I was already living in semi-poverty at that point, trying to support my 2 children. And my response brief, I thought, was very well done. I had gone to the University of Pittsburgh Library. I had engaged the librarians. I told them I wasn't a lawyer, but could you point me in the right direction? Pardons is what Pennsylvania law is called. And they put me in the right spot, and I wrote a response brief demonstrating that the law that the other attorney had used to bolster her argument was actually more relevant to my argument. Wow. In other words, I demonstrated through my response brief that her law was better for me than for her argument.
Right.
Because basically she was from a big-ass law firm, excuse my expression, and she had used her law clerks to write her briefs for her, and she just signed off on them. Well, the law clerk screwed up and just read the... there are certain, in the beginning of a law, any kind of a case law, you're going to find these little brief explanations of what the law is, and then you get into the body of the brief of the case law, and sometimes it says something a little different. Well, in fact, that's what happened. And the judge came out, Judge WEDIC. Myron WEDIC was a very, God rest his soul, he was a wonderful judge in the Allegheny County system. And he had a famous motions day when lawyers would show up just to watch him perform. Okay, and Weddy came out on the bench and he said, "Today's the last day of this case." And he looked down at the other attorney and said, "Ms. Joy, did you read Mr. Gaudio's response brief?" And she said, "I have to confess, Your Honor, I didn't." He said, "Well, you should have." He said, because he demonstrated that the law you used to bolster your argument actually was more in favor of his argument than yours. And so what I would like you to do, Ms. Joy, is go out in the hallway with Mr. Gaudio and make a deal. Is there anything on the table about how this matter might be resolved? And I said, there's been an agreement there's been an offer on the table for 3 years, Your Honor. He said, Ms. Joy, I suggest that you and your client go out in the hallway and accept it.
Wow.
And that didn't go well with my ex-wife. But we went out in the hall, and she said, what do you want? And I said, exactly what I put in the proposed agreement 3 years ago. She said, you've got it. And we went back in the room 15 minutes later, and the judge came out, and he said, well, how are we doing? And she said, well, we've got an agreement. He said, great. Fantastic. So this matter is over.
Yeah.
He said, Mr. Gaudio, I want to see you in my office after this is over. And I started shaking, and my legs start to shake. I figure he's going to have me arrested for practicing law without a license or something. And I went into his office. It was Friday afternoon, and he had his tie off and his robe off, and he said, you look like a Scotchman to me. I said, yes, sir, I've been known to drink a glass of scotch occasionally. And he pulled out a wonderful bottle of 18-year-old, I think it was Glenfiddich, and poured us both a dram and sat down with me and said, Bob, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I'm a restaurant manager. Yeah. He said, you should be a lawyer, because you just kicked the ass of one of the best family lawyers in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
I said, well, Your Honor, I don't know. He said, no. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, yes, I should be a lawyer. I want you to be a part of my bar.
Wow.
Okay? And we had a little glass of scotch, and I discussed with him why that's not possible, because I had 2 children to support, blah, 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 blah. He said, no, you should do this, basically. And it got me thinking. Yeah. And I was, at that point in time, I was living with this lovely lady that's seated to your right, and I brought it to her attention, and she said, why not? Go take the LSAT and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I took the LSAT, and I did well enough that I was eligible to go to Duquesne University's evening program. I just so happened to have worked for Paul Martha, who was the president of the Penguins when I was working at the Civic Arena. He was the chairman of the board of the law school at Duquesne, and he wrote me a recommendation letter, which got me in pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
And that's another story in and of itself. But ultimately, I went to night school at Duquesne, and it was all because of Judge WExPod kicking me in the pants. Funny.
Just the one conversation?
Yes, and
wow.
But it comes
Powerful.
around. It comes around full circle, because my final class in law school at Duquesne was a mediation arbitration class. It was an evening class, and we were going to bring food and just have a special speaker for about an hour, and then eat, and then go down to the bar and celebrate the fact we were done.
Yeah.
And we had our food, and the speaker came in, and it was Judge WExPod.
Wow.
I had no idea who he was bringing in. He brings in Judge WExPod, and WExPod, this was 4 years later.
Wow.
Okay, or 4.5 years later. And at the end of class, I went up to him and I said, do you remember me? He looked at me, he said, you look familiar. I said, remember you had me in your office, we had a little scotch, and you suggested I go to law school? And his eyes lit up. And he gave me a hug, and he said, well, welcome to the bar.
Wow.
And it gives me chills, Stephen, right now. Think about it, because what a interesting perspective.
That's like a scene from a movie.
It is, yeah. Cause he was the dude that kind of kicked me to pants, and sort of thanks to Claire being a law widow for 4 years. Yeah. I mean, we got married in July, and I started law school in September.
Wow.
So she spent her evenings. We had a cat. I think that was the only her only companion during those years. Because I'd go home, we'd eat at 9:30 at night, we'd have dinner, and then she'd go to bed, and I'd stay up till 3:30, 4 in the morning, and sometimes study law, go to bed, get a couple hours sleep, go to work. I'd work 10 hours to go to work, go to school at night, and but it was a very, very fulfilling experience for me. At 44, I became a lawyer, so wow. I've been doing this 20 years as of next week, April 27th.
Now, did you have an interest in being a lawyer before
yes.
the judge?
Yeah.
So it kind of was an itch you had there.
Yeah, I planned on being a lawyer coming out of college, but I loved writing, and I loved the whole idea of teaching school. I got a master's degree, and I was at WVU for a couple of years, English composition and American literature, and I hated it.
Yeah.
And that's when we transitioned. My first wife and I, she was a nurse, so we were easily allowed to become part of the Peace Corps program, and that's where I always wanted to be in Peace Corps. From the time I sat on the floor in 1961 and watched President Kennedy announce the fact that you could serve your country without carrying a gun.
Yeah.
You could serve your country by going somewhere that needed your help, needed your expertise, and be an American in another land and share your expertise and absorb their culture. And I was a little kid, when this was all going on. In 1961, I was 9. But I wanted that from the very first moment I saw it. And I looked at my mom and said, "Mom, I'm going to be in the Peace Corps." And she went, "Yeah, Bobby, yeah." But I had every intention of going, and I was lucky enough to be married to a nurse who could get in like that because they needed medical people. They didn't need English teachers, but they took me on as a non-matrix spouse, and that's how I got involved with Peace Corps. But college teaching was not my genre for various reasons. They didn't want you to teach. They wanted you to publish. They wanted you to live by the rules and be on committees.
Yeah.
And if I tried to teach, it was, it seemed to be like a secondary or a tertiary thing that you're supposed to do, rather than, make the college look good. And I wasn't into that at that point. Now, if somebody offered me a college teaching job right now, I'd take it. As he spoke to the microphone. No, I would love to go and in my later years now
as a teacher,
teach a criminal justice class or two if they would compensate me fairly.
Sure.
But I love being a criminal lawyer. I enjoy what I do. I'm a public defender here in Ohio County. I've spent time in Brooke County as a public defender as well, and I just enjoy the whole aspect of criminal defense, defending the Constitution of the United States against the power of the state, and that's what I do every day.
And I want to, because it's, I think most people listening to this have watched Law and Order and have grown up watching courtroom shows. It's one of the most popular genres of TV. So I definitely want to get to that. But I wanted to ask you about the Peace Corps. Where did you go in the Peace Corps?
We had a choice of, they give you a choice of 8 different places. They give you 4, and if you don't like those 4, they'll give you another 4. And of the first 4 that we were to choose from was a place called the Yemen Arab Republic. At that time, Yemen was sliced into 2 different parts. North and South Yemen. South was controlled by the Russian USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The North was controlled by nobody. It was invaded by America and China and anybody that could get a piece. But Russians, the USSR, controlled the South. So I saw Yemen Arab Republic and had no idea where it was. And I prided myself, political science major, English major, I prided myself on my international geographic knowledge, and I had no clue where the Yemen Arab Republic was, and that intrigued me.
Yeah.
And my intriguement, having been intrigued, I talked my then wife into looking into it, and we went to the library and we looked at it, and we had no idea that it was even there.
Yeah.
And it's situated below Saudi Arabia on the Arab Peninsula, and it just was the place I wanted to be because it was a place I had no knowledge of.
Yeah.
Rather than going to Jamaica or India or someplace. And that's how, so we chose the Yemen Arab Republic, and I never, ever, ever regretted that. It was an amazing experience for me as a 26-year-old man.
Has
American.
it been completely different than anything you were?
Yeah, you were entering from the 20th century. You stepped directly into the 15th century in a lot of ways. Men plowing sand with a burro, pulling a hand plow.
Wow.
That sort of experience. You'd go into the mountains and find tribes that were, living hundreds of years. The way that their lifestyle was hundreds of years prior to what you stepped out of. It was an amazing experience from that aspect. The language is totally different. It's written from. We write from left to right. It's written from right to left.
Oh,
it's
wow.
a different script. Yeah. The Quran, I was ill-knowledgeable of the Quran. I knew of the Quran, but I was ill-knowledgeable of it, of the contents of it, and of Islam itself. I became very involved in the knowledge and learning Islam, learning how to read Arabic, how to sing the Quran. It opened the whole world up to me. And a kid from Follinsby, West Virginia, who knew very little of the real world, really, particularly of Middle East. When you're submerged very quickly into a world that is not yours.
Yeah.
and you're 6'2" white guy in a 4'8" brown world, and that makes you the minority when you step into the street.
Right.
And that makes you noticeable when you step into the street to buy, a Pepsi or to go down and get your groceries, and it's an interesting role for a tall white American from a small town in West Virginia to step into that particular culture.
Well, that's had to have been a very growing experience to have that, and probably helps you out in your job now.
Yes,
being that you were the odd man out, and seeing how other people live. And
I never thought about it like that until you just said that. Yeah, the perspective of being the person who was the target.
Yeah.
In all aspects, when you stepped into the street, you were noticed.
Yeah.
You were an oddity, an anomaly, an alien, and even though you spoke the language and you respected the culture, that didn't matter a lot sometimes.
Yeah.
And I get that. Maybe that does help me in my present job, where I have to deal with the poorest of the poor in our communities who, break the law sometimes to feed an addiction, or who break the law because they are desperate to feed their children.
Yeah.
That's probably right, James. You just opened the door for me. That's very cool.
And I think at a young age you got to see that not everybody lives the way that we do, because I think, myself included, I'm aware that people live differently than we do in America, but it's hard for me to picture it because I've never traveled enough to see that. But
yes,
if you'd have that experience as a young man, I think that's a really good thing to take through your life, to see the world from a different point of view.
We have poor in America. We have poor in West Virginia. If you go down to Mingo and Pocahontas, Calhoun counties, you'll find some serious poverty. But our poverty in America does not any way, shape, or form compared to the poverty that you see in the streets of Delhi in India, or in Kathmandu, or in places that I have been privileged to visit in Central Africa and in Chad. The poverty there is basic nothing poverty, where you don't have hope for a meal that day.
Right.
You have no hope for water unless you go get it.
Yeah.
You don't have, you just don't have. And the folks that live that way and are happy with their life, who are happy with each other, and partner with one another, and have a joy about their existence, even though they have literally nothing.
Right.
When you see that and you experience that as a young 26, 27-year-old man, and then you come home to us, we're extremely affluent, and our poverty is affluent.
It is, because it's not that they can't afford anything; it's that it's just not there.
Right.
If you have on your worst day, if you really had to, you could probably sneak into Kroger's, and there's tons of food in there. And I remind myself that all the time, that people live without cell phones, without cars, without houses, without running water. Humans can live without all those things, and we can have all those things and a big, fat, full belly, and still consider ourselves unlucky, which compared to maybe some of the other people that live near us,
that's our problem. Our problem is we compare.
Yeah.
You turn on your television and you watch whatever you're watching, and you see an affluence that you would like to be a part of. You want to have that better car.
Yeah.
You want to live in that bigger house. You want to have that better job. You want to be paid that bigger salary. And what you find, I think, when you come down to the roots of the foundation of life, is that you don't need that.
You don't.
You don't need it. It's nice.
Yeah.
As Judge Rex used to say to me very often from the bench before he retired, Bob, it's nice, but not necessary.
That's absolutely right, yeah.
So if Judge Rex hears this, God, we miss you, man. He was a great judge. But to see a poverty at that level, where somebody has to go down the hill 3 miles to dip a huge urn into the water, put it on her head, and carry it 3 miles back so her kid can have some drinking water, or they have some water to cook with. and then you see somebody bitching about the fact that they they can't afford a Maserati.
Right.
There's a balance.
And there's a good chance she has a smile on her face while she's carrying the water.
Well, yeah, because there's a community.
Water.
There's a community of women, and they're together, and they're doing the same task, which is a very basic need that their children and their families have.
Yeah.
And when you're not a part of that. I mean, we were very well compensated as Peace Corps volunteers. They paid our rent. We had enough money for food and clothing and travel. So we weren't poor by any means, but we were living with and within that. I mean, when I did a water project, I think of this one often. We did a water project in the deserted quarter, which is the largest land desert in the world, which people think the Sahara is. They're wrong. It's in the very easternmost part of Yemen. It's where Lawrence of Arabia had his adventures.
Hence the movie we were discussing earlier, yeah.
Yes, that's where Lawrence had his adventures. I did a water project out there. I lived with Bedouins. I lived with the Bedouin tribe. And to watch their faces when the first water came out of the pipes.
Yeah. Something that we take for granted every day.
Yeah. It was a miracle.
Yeah.
Even though they helped from day one, they helped put the whole project together, the piping, the pumps, all of that, the generator to drive the pump, all of the digging, the getting, doing the digging for the well and getting to the water. They were involved in the whole process. It was the idea that I could go like this and just twist a thing.
And they probably never seen that.
No,
before.
Of course not. But it was a miracle.
Yeah.
and hugging and lifelong friendships, and all because we dug a well and pumped it out and brought it to them rather than them having to go get it.
Something like running water is a game changer for those people.
It really is. And if you know the politics of the Middle East at all, and most people don't, you know that water is a big part of clean drinking water is a very large part of the politics of the Middle East. Very big part of the politics of Israel and Palestine. But people don't realize that. They think they just hate each other.
Yeah.
But if you take clean water and you put it into that equation, you find that is a very large part of why these folks are at each other's throats constantly.
Wow. Over water.
Over clean drinking water.
Yeah.
Because it is a basic human need.
Yeah.
We don't think about it because, hell, we just turn our taps on and there it is, and we bitch when it comes out a little bit cloudy.
Yeah. This afternoon, we had a little thunderstorm came up, and my power was out for 3 hours.
Oh, God.
And I think I handled it pretty well because I went out in the garage and tinkered around a little bit.
Right.
But it was gnawing at the back of my mind. And I didn't have anything that I needed to do during the middle of the day that required power, but I just felt better when it was back on.
When it comes back on, you feel like, oh, God, this is great.
Yeah.
Life is back to normal. Yeah. We live in one of those homes where we live on a grid that is, I call it Hooterville, where it's off and off. It's off. If something bad happens weather-wise, we can count on, which is why we have not in this room at the moment, there is an oil lamp, but we have lanterns and lamps and candles all over this house because we're just used to lights going off. It's like, okay, light them up, open the windows.
It is one of those things, though, that water and electricity and some of the basic fundamental things that we're used to, you take them for granted,
right? Because
they work so often that when they don't work, it's kind of a weird feeling. Rocks your sense of security. For like me, my power's pretty stable. They cleared out the power lines of trees 5-6 years ago, and the power doesn't go off very often. And when it does, you always just feel a little bit better. You rest easier knowing it's back on.
We have little squirrels all over. We live near the woods, and squirrels get it, and go and touch whatever they do they touch the substation with their tail and they get fried and all the power goes off for hours.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot, It's okay. We're used to it. But you're right. It takes away your stability. It takes away your sense of evenness, your foundation, because you're used to having 24/7 power. Yeah. And I was in a clinic in Sa'ada, which is in the very northern district of Yemen. It's right near the Saudi border. And I was in charge of making sure the generator worked for the hospital. And, these guys flew in from Africa. They're called the Flying Doctors of Africa, and they're English doctors who do nothing but eye surgeries all over the poor areas of the Middle East and Africa and the continent of Africa. And they fly these planes, they land, they come out and they do eye surgeries for days on end, 12-hour days where they just... So they came to Sada, and my job was to make sure they had power. And the city power was iffy. Yeah. So, you know, so we had city power one day, and I was in the operating theater because I helped make sure oxygen was working and all that stuff. And the city power went right in the middle of this poor doctor removing this woman's eye. Okay, he was literally had the eye in the forceps, and the power goes. Oh, no. And he looked at me because the flashlights come on. He looks at me and says, "Robert," and I ran like, you know, the fastest human out to the generator building, praying to God that baby fired up quick. Yeah. Because sometimes, you know, it's a machine. Sure. And I ran into that building, and I'm praying to all the gods that existed, and I fired that baby. And it fired up. I was like, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you." And I ran back, and he said, "We're fortunate that we had power because I had this woman's eye in my hand." I said, no. I know. Those kind of things happen. But that's when you come to appreciate the fact of power and having electricity, you know, available to you all the time. And those are the types of things as a very young man in my mid to late 20s that I came to understand were not something that everybody in this world has or depend upon. You know, you live in the middle of the desert with Bedouins, they don't have electricity out there. Yeah. You know?
And I think probably to learn that just probably to a large extent they get along just fine. They're still happy. They're not.
Exactly. People adapt. We are extremely adaptable animals, human beings, and we adapt to our circumstances. But some of the circumstances we have to adapt to are unconscionable. Yeah. The poverty that we are forced to adapt to as human beings sometimes is inexcusable given the amount of affluence on other parts of the planet. I agree. And that's when people start calling me a communist or a socialist. And you can call me whatever you'd like. But I will tell you as a fact, if we do not have balance in this world, we are not doing ourselves justice as human beings. Right. We are diminishing ourselves as creatures of God if we are allowing someone to live like that without addressing it in a way that we can balance it a little bit more. I'm not saying making everybody the Rockefellers. I'm just saying balancing it to the point where they're not having to live in poverty and dirt. Yeah. And have to carry their water, and you know, scrounge for food every day. And
I think that there's definitely some middle ground there where a little bit of compassion goes a long way. Well, just making sure that everybody's.
We have selective compassion in a capitalist society, and I understand that. You know, capitalism has done well for lots and lots of people, but it is a system that promotes poverty as well as affluence. Without some measure of poverty, you have no affluence, and that's the problem in socioeconomic systems throughout the planet. And I've seen it all when it comes to the lowest of the low and the highest of the high. I've been in the mansions and I've lived in the dirt huts. So I kind of have a perspective that a lot of folks don't have. Yeah. And I still have a positive perspective on life. Well, I think you can ask Claire. Is that true? I don't know.
I think it is. Talking about your different experiences. Of course, my experience was slightly different because coming from England.
And I was going to ask you about that. Yes.
Coming from England, which
what part of England?
Just southwest of London.
Okay.
Yes. And so, you know, I can remember the very first day that I actually went to Giant Eagle in Pittsburgh, and just being absolutely staggered that there was an entire row in the aisle devoted to dog food. Yeah. And that, you know, Britain, that is this sort of massively dog-centric society.
Oh, yes.
If something happens that's terrible to a dog, it will probably get on national news. You know.
Right.
So,
well, that dog being brutalized when the Iraq War started.
Yes.
The lead story was some dog that had been brutalized in some part of England, and the second story was the Iraq War beginning on the evening news.
We're very serious about our dogs, but if you go into a British grocery store, if you walked into Tesco's or if you walked into Sainsbury's or Waitrose, you might find, let's see, a couple of shelves with dog food on it. But not an entire aisle of dog food. And then, you know, after you've gone past the dog food aisle, then you go to the orange juice. You see orange juice. I've never seen so many different types of orange juice. Do I want pulp? Do I not want pulp?
Pulpish.
Pulpish, pulp. Orange juice and pineapple mixed together. You know.
And the cereal aisle must be.
And then the cereal aisle. Well, that just blew my mind. The cereal aisle. I've never seen so many boxes of cereal in my entire life. So yeah, the choice is great, but is it necessary? You know, I mean, most of Europe you can survive on maybe 4 or 5 different types of cereal.
Yeah.
And you can live.
Yeah, probably your whole life you weren't thinking, I need to get to a place where there's better cereal choices.
Really, it just blew my mind.
And without Captain Crunch, how could you survive?
Well, but so it just there sort of you do adapt, and you know if what you grow up in being and you're used to. Suddenly when you step in through a different door, people have adapted to a wholly different way.
Right.
And then over the course of time, now I've been here over 3 decades, you know, you find yourself adapting.
She was 5 when she came to
Oh, yes,
him.
I was 5. And so...
You'd miss your Fruit Loops if you
That's
had
right, exactly. And my Captain Crunch.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you go back and you think, gosh, the grocery stores in England are tiny.
Yeah.
How do these people survive? You know?
How can you live on only 3 cereals?
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, you go into a grocery store in Britain, you need to take a shopping basket with you. You have a shopping basket that you put your groceries in, or you bring bags.
So there's no carts.
So there are carts. You trolleys.
Oh, okay.
Trolleys, yeah.
So supermarket trolleys. And they're much smaller, by the way, than American supermarket trolleys.
Yeah, they're not like the size of Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah. My car won't fit this whole basket full.
Exactly. But, so you just, it is amazing how you adapt and adjust. But, yeah, you take your own grocery carrying device, whatever it is, and if you've forgotten them, then you have to pay for a grocery bag.
You do.
So you do not see piles of Kroger bags or piles. You don't see that.
Yeah.
Because
you have to pay for
a grocery bag.
Right, right.
So that kind of keeps things in line. But yeah, everything is very much more. It's very much more compact, but it's also in many ways it's a much denser population. The southeast of England is one of the most densely populated parts of the planet.
I didn't know that.
So, I mean, you can still see green fields, and you can still go for a walk in a wood and all the rest of it, but there are tons of cars.
Yep.
A lot of people do not have cars because you have public transportation. You have trains and buses and
bicycles.
And bicycles.
Yep.
People ride bikes a lot more.
And I heard an odd statistic that the population of London is just now getting back to where it was before the plague or the World War II or something, that it's so as many people as there are now. It's before plumbing it had that many people.
Yes.
That's an insane thing to think about.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, what brought you to America?
Well, I had an opportunity to come and what I thought work for 3 months.
It's a 3-month contract.
It's a 3-month contract. No, I had an opportunity. I'm an occupational therapist, and my boss, my director in England of our department, I worked in a physical rehab centre where we treated a lot of industrial injuries, sports injuries, and the director of the department was very good friends with this American lady. At the time, we didn't realise that she was the sort of one of the godmothers or grandmothers of hand therapy and burn therapy in the United States. She was just moored to us. So Maud would come and stay with my boss, Lynn, and we would have this ridiculous thing every time she came to visit, where people would just be asked to bring something to eat. And so apparently this was a very American thing to do, was that we showed up
potluck
with
potluck,
something.
yeah.
Something. I mean, this just sort of bent our minds a little bit, because how would you know? Somebody might bring beans and somebody else might bring beans.
And in America, they're like, that's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So
just
anyway,
eat beans.
Yeah.
So this would throw us off a little bit. But anyway, so we'd have these potluck dinners with Maud, and she'd always finish, and there were a number of therapists there. We were all in our sort of 20s and bright-eyed young things, you know. And she would always end up the evening with, "Oh, you girls, you've got to come to America someday." And we'd always go, "Oh, Maud,
sure.
come on." You know, but one day, Maud called and had talked to Lynn, and she said, "Do you know of anybody who might be interested in coming to the States for a few months?" And she said, "Yes, I do." And she hands me the phone.
Were you the closest one?
So I had just how should we put this? I'd had a major disagreement with the medical director of the rehab centre over something totally unrelated, and the guy that I'd been dating for 4 years announced that he was getting married to someone else.
Oh no!
So it was a rather bad week. And,
I love the way she describes that. A rather bad week.
So,
A few years down the road, you can look at it that way. I'm sure at the time
it was a bit
devastating.
Well, and also I told the medical director to what he could do with himself, basically, and that I had resigned.
Oh.
But I also lived in the rehab centre, so I had just lost my home as well.
Oh.
So, you know, with all that sort of culmination of events, Lynn said, "Oh, this is a good thing for Claire to do." So
America looked pretty good at that point.
At that point, I was like, "Yeah, sure, that would be neat. All right, I'll go." And I thought I was going to be treating industrially injured back injuries and hand injuries and what have you. And so that's what I was led to believe. And when I get to this side of the pond, Maud says, "You're going to be treating acute burns," which is a very specialised area of practice. And I had, you know, I burnt my finger once.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd never treated a burn injury. So it was a very steep learning curve, and I worked at West Penn Hospital, and I was there for about 15 months. Basically, they kept saying, "Oh, well, when I got off the plane, it was like, we're so glad you're here for 6 months." And I'm like, "What happened to the 3 months?" And then it was, "Well, your visa's good for a year, so if you want to stay, okay, well, I am learning a lot, so maybe I'll stay the year."
Yeah.
And then I was told my visa had been renewed. It's like, how can you do that without me? So your visa's been renewed, and we'd like you to stay another year. So I said, "Well, okay, well, 2 years. 2 years will be tops."
Yeah.
And then one of my co-workers was beginning to feel sorry for me that I wasn't dating anyone. "I don't want to get involved with any man.
Yeah, I'm only here for
I'm only here
that's
for a
right.
period of time.
Having been
Much
burned.
day.
I don't want to do no." So little did I know that somebody else in Pittsburgh was being badgered. "You know, Bob, you've gone through this divorce and it's a bad situation. You need to get out and meet people." And so we were sort of, how should I put it, pushed. We were both digging our toes in, not wanting to get into
It took a while for him to get us together. It was a woman that was working with Claire as a nurse, was formerly one of my waitresses in a restaurant, and her husband was my assistant manager at the restaurant I was running at the time. So they were basically colluding, conspiring to get us together because they felt that we would fit, I guess.
They kept telling me that Bob is so worldly. And I had no idea what that
What the hell does that mean? I
What
don't know
does
what
that
that means. I still don't know what that means.
So, but anyway, eventually we both broke down and said, "Okay, well, we'll meet for a drink, but you guys are going to be with us."
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
So
Obviously it worked out.
So, and then, of course, I stayed my second year, and then they wanted me to go to Harmerville Rehab Centre, which is actually where Maud was director at the time, and she had me really work at the chronic pain management program. Had no occupational therapy component, and so she said, well, I want you to develop an OT component to the program.
Wow.
I think it would be really beneficial. And so I was kind of thrown into another whole situation.
Yeah.
But it was very magnetic.
It was.
You wanted to do that.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one thing led to another, and then it's kind of like, well, Claire, it's time to get a green card. And
right.
just suddenly, and here we are, almost 32 years later. I wonder, now, was I supposed to go back to England at some point? But yeah, so it's been a kind of an amazing journey, really.
Yeah. I mean, now that I'm 50, I really realized that you can't plan for anything. Nothing is set in stone. You might as well expect the unexpected. Things that I thought would never happen, or that I couldn't think of happen, and some things that I thought were a foregone conclusion, it's a done deal. Then all of a sudden, it's not, so.
That's what's great, but that's what's great about life.
That is what's great about life is, and I think that I'm really in a good, now that I'm getting older, I'm really in a good place, I think, where I kind of embrace the fact that, that's just the way it is at the moment. But it's not going to be like that forever. Could get worse. Could get better. You don't know. Like, I don't know, and so I'm able to move on from things quicker because I'm like, well, that's if I'm feeling bad today, that's just a temporary thing. I could be feeling great tomorrow, and vice versa. And
well, and I think too, obviously with age, we get more comfortable in our own skin.
Yeah,
it's a very different thing when you're sort of maybe in your early 20s and you have goals, you have ideas of where you want to be, and this is what I need to do and what I must do. But then also embrace the fact that, well, maybe that isn't the best thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that thing over there is better for me to do. So always keep your eyes open, and it's now, of course, we have a 16-year-old son. We're old parents.
Yeah, we're the old parents at the PTA meeting. They always want us to be the president. Oh, you're old. You can be president. No, I can't. Shut up. Be your second.
So you realize that with the additional years that we have and life experience, that you don't want to crush. You don't want to sort of overwhelm your 16-year-old with, well, you could do that, but keep your eyes open for other things. Wait a minute, I can only just focus on this one thing.
Right.
So,
or nothing.
Or nothing.
That's the other thing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of keep that in perspective too.
But that's good that you have that experience, being older parents, that you can bring that, and
yes.
I think that kind of goes around to that there really is no bad time to have kids. If you have them when you're younger, then you have maybe a little bit more energy and whatnot. But then if you're older, you have a little bit more stability in the career and some more wisdom. And
yeah, there's a myth though that they say that children keep you young. That's a myth.
No,
I'm just saying it's a myth.
I think the reason why I'm a youthful 50-year-old is because I've never partaked in parenthood.
But now, having children is an extremely satisfying experience.
Sure.
It is a growthful experience as a human being to have offspring. But it's not necessary to lead a reasonable, authentic existence. Yeah. It's not necessary. I'm just glad I did. You know, and now I have grandkids. We have grandkids.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. It's like, because you can give them back. You don't have to raise them. You just kind of love them and spoil them and hand them back. But raising children is a difficult process that is so satisfying and so positive if you allow it to be.
Yeah.
I have clients that don't see it that way. They see it as a burden. It's negativity. And I think that's the key. The key in any life that is authentic and is someone who can live a life with a positive attitude every day. Yeah, we're going to die at the end.
Yeah.
Yep. Everybody does.
Right.
I had 3 funerals last week, and I had a grandchild born this morning.
Right.
You die and you live. And Bob Dylan was one of our finest poets. You know, he writes fabulous lyric about that.
Yeah.
Just read it as poetry. Yeah, those not busy being born are busy dying. Yeah. Beautiful line. It's absolutely correct. And those are the types of poetry and lyric that I was raised on, that I realized, yeah, you can live this whole thing negatively. Everything's bullshit. Everything is negative. Everything is bad. Excuse my expression. But it's easy, because it's easy to be pissed off, and it's easy to be negative, because there's all kind of stuff you can find in people's lives and the drama of life. And think of for example, what I do for a living. There's a lot of negativity.
Well, you're dealing with people going through one of the worst things in their life. I mean,
look what Claire does for a living. People come in hurt.
Yeah.
You know, they're in pain. They want to. If you think about it, all these whiny people that come in here with a negative attitude, and they're just whiny people, and we're all hurt at some point in our lives. Versus, I can find a way to heal you.
Yeah.
I can find a way to make you feel better. I have ways that I can. We don't have to use drugs. We can. My approach to my clients is, look, you're at the very bottom of your life. Yeah. You're sitting in an orange jumpsuit in chains across the table from me.
Yeah. It doesn't get any worse than that.
How much lower can you get? And there are some of my clients, because they're drug addicted or alcoholics or whatever they are, that they have nobody left. Yeah. They have played out every human being in their lives. Yeah. They have nobody in their family that wants to even look at them.
Yeah.
So talk about being at the bottom of your game, being at the bottom of the barrel. I approach them in a very positive way. I don't treat them as some kind of disgusting, low-end human being. I treat them as me.
Right.
That's me sitting across the table. I got to meet Mother Teresa when I was in the Peace Corps, because she came as she was the head of the Sisters of Charity, and the Sisters of Charity had a contingent in Hodeidah, where I was working in the hospital. And she was one of the people in my life, now she's Saint Mother Teresa, who showed me that you can take all the bullshit, all the negativity. I mean, she came from the dregs of the Indian society, where she would be on her knees in New Delhi treating people with leprosy. But she was one of the most positive human beings you could possibly imagine. She was tough on her girls.
Yeah.
Don't believe me. She was tough on those women, because they were supposed to be the brides of Christ, and you, by God, better be clean, and you better be positive, you better be smiling.
Yeah.
She was tough on them. But with the lepers that we dealt with in the leper colony in Hodeidah, with the people that were the poorest of the poor, she was loving, understanding, and she was one of them. And she said to me, I approach each human being as Jesus, because Jesus is in everyone.
Right.
God is in everyone. That was my lesson. That's how I do it.
Yeah.
I'm not a guy that wears my religion on my sleeve. I don't go out trying to proselytize. I'm not going to sit here and show you my Bible verses.
Right.
But that woman comes into my mind 4 or 5 times a day.
Really?
When I'm sitting across from some of the most downtrodden individuals you can possibly imagine, who are drug-addled, that don't have any control of their lives whatsoever. They are so heroin addicted that they have no control of what they do or what they say or what they are. And I think of that lady. I think of Mother Teresa sitting there saying, every one of these people that I'm dealing with is Jesus, is God. And that's how I deal with it. And that's how I deal with it. And I don't tell people that. I just did into a microphone. But that's how I do it, and it's positive.
Yeah.
It's like I'm dealing with a higher power every time I deal with a fellow human being. I'm dealing with whatever keeps them alive. And nobody really knows why we stay alive, by the way.
Yeah.
They know there's an electricity out of the brain that keeps everything functioning, but they don't really know where that essence is, where that origin is. That's what I focus on. I focus on the fact that that's a fellow human being, and I'm going to deal with that person just like I would deal with myself, or Mr. Nutting, or Mr. Rockefeller,
or just someone you care about.
Anybody. or my lovely wife, or my son, or my other children, or my grandchildren. Yeah, because we're all as as one of my favorite comic troops used to say, we're all bozos on this bus.
Right.
Okay.
And I think being able to readily access your compassion when you're a public defender has to be a really good and important trait to have.
Yes. And some measure of insanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, you probably do have to. I mean,
you better have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
You better have a sense of humor.
I kind of feel the same way working at a hospital.
Right.
In fact, it was funny that you were talking about life and death, and somebody said to me, we were talking about a patient. He said, "Do you think they're going to live?" And I said, "They're definitely going to die someday. I don't know. I hope it's not today."
But then the folks you work with chuckle.
Yeah, and you have a sense of humor about it.
Right.
And, do fire and EMS. I don't do it very much anymore. I'm too busy with other things, I guess. But same thing. We see people on some of the worst days of their life when they're having a heart attack.
That's you.
My stupid phone.
That's right. Your phone is very loud. That's
yeah.
good. That's good. People know that you're here.
People are always calling.
That's good.
Seeing people going through those bad moments of their life make you realize how good they are. And I've had some rough patches in my life, so I think as much as I wouldn't want to go through them again, nor would I want anybody else to have to go through them, I can definitely look at somebody else and go, man, that could have been me.
Yeah.
And in some cases, that was me. But,
or it will be you.
Yeah, or it will be me. And definitely, there but for the grace of God go I, passes through my mind a lot of times because, I kind of had a rebellious period. And
come on, James.
And well, I mean, I was in I was on the motorcycle up in Washington, PA last week, and I got hit by a truck.
Oh my gosh!
And I didn't get hurt. I mean, but I could have not been here tonight. I could have been in a hospital.
Head injured. Sure. Yep.
Broken leg, shattered pelvis. The list goes on. Being in a hospital, the things that run.
Especially motorcycle guys.
My insurance, my insurance agent said anytime a vehicle makes contact with a motorcycle and the rider doesn't get hurt, he gets like $1 million and one. It's almost unheard of.
It is. It's ridiculous.
And
the odds are bad against the rider of a motorcycle.
Yeah, yeah. Even just in general of anything.
Yes.
So I think probably maybe from my mom, I was lucky that I learned to count my blessings and the fact that I have had some long bad periods in my life that, man, I wake up every day and feel very glad for what I have. And
just be grateful for another day.
To access compassion, one of the best things I ever learned, because I do get a little bit of a road rage, is they said, imagine that's your grandparents in the car ahead of you. And
you sound like my son.
Yeah.
David does that to me when I bitch at the guy in front of me. Like, come on, Dad, patience.
Yeah.
That could be your mom.
Yeah.
That could be your dad.
That thought pops in my head, and I'm like, okay. Yeah, that's somebody's Meemaw. I don't want to freak them out on the way to the grocery store.
My mom was funny when I would, she's passed in 2009. Both my parents passed within 2 months of each other. They were married for many, many years, many decades, 60 years. And she used to call me up when I would be sitting next to somebody on television who was obviously pleading guilty to something or had been found guilty of something. And Katie, you're going to kill me for this. I'm talking to my mother. But she'd call and she'd say, how can you defend that son of a bitch?
Yeah.
He's obviously guilty. Usually a rapist or, some of how can you? And I'd say, Ma, what if that was your son?
Yeah.
What if that's your brother? What if that's your husband? Wouldn't you want that person, that relative, to have the best criminal defense lawyer that they could possibly have? Wouldn't you want that? And she'd say, well, yes. There'd be a long pause. Then she'd say, but not that son of a bitch. He's as guilty as sin. Right. There's no doubt about it. I'm sorry, Katie, but I had to tell that story. She was wonderful too.
So, is that hard when somebody that how do you deal with that? I mean, I would think that
I'm very sorry when someone makes a mistake like that. When somebody is, I've had very few people, James, in my practice in the last 20 years that I felt were truly evil.
Yeah.
That had heartless, cold response to life that sat across from me in the table in the interview room, and I felt nothing.
Yeah.
That felt like they were so self-centered that they could step on their own mother's face and wouldn't bother them. Very few, maybe 2% of the people I've represented. And I've represented thousands of people over the last 20 years. So yeah, there's a compassion aspect, but there's also the understanding that we make mistakes.
Yeah.
And particularly when we are involved emotionally to the extent that we have made ourselves mentally ill as a result of the emotional response to that person, or as a result of drug or alcohol induced behaviors.
Yeah.
If I took drugs and alcohol out of my present file drawers, and I probably have 110 cases ongoing right now, if I took alcohol and street drugs and prescription medication out of my drawers, there would be 20% of the cases left, maybe 18% of the cases left, because they are driven by these crimes that they're charged with are driven by the alcohol and the drug and the prescription drug and the street drug addictions. And it's apparent when you get to know these people. And that's some of the pride that I take in my practice is I get to know my clients. I want to know them. I ask them questions about their lives, about who they are, their children, their relationships, their past life, how they were treated by their parents, what their educational level was. I get to know them because then I can walk into a courtroom and stand up in front of a judge and a jury and a public and say, here's who this person is. You don't know this person, Your Honor. You don't know this person, jury. But I've gotten to know them a little bit. I want you to understand who they are. So that when you decide that they're going to go to prison for the next 10 to 30 years, you know who you're dealing with. I think that is the least the criminal defense lawyer can do, is to find out who the person is that you're dealing with. Now, sometimes my clients won't let me know. Yeah. They won't tell me. They refuse to let me in. And I get that too. And I tell them first day I meet them, I say, you're not going to trust me. I get that. Yeah. I wouldn't trust me if I met my lawyer for the first day.
Yeah.
But eventually, you better goddamn well trust me, because we're going to have a relationship that involves me keeping you out of prison for a long, long time.
Yeah, I'm all you got right now.
At some point, I'm your best friend between here and the courthouse. And you better get to know that, A, I care about your case, and B, you better let me in a little bit. Because if you do, I can help you a little better. Yeah. I just had a trial where the guy let me in totally. It was a strangulation case, and he was exonerated. He was found not guilty. But the reason he was found not guilty was not just me. I'm pretty good in the courtroom. Yeah. But it was because he got involved and allowed me in and let me know who he is, and he got involved in his case. Yeah. And he was personally involved and did stuff and worked towards his exoneration. Yeah. Versus some guy that just goes, he's my lawyer. He'll take care of me. Yeah. Right. So when they let me in, James, like any personal relationship, if you let the person in, you're taking a shot. You're taking a chance. Sure. But if it's going to pay dividends, what the hell? Do it. And if you get burned, you're going to get burned occasionally. Yeah.
And in the world that we live in today, people don't let people in as much.
We play on units, computers, handheld devices.
We put up the ideal version of ourselves on Facebook, I know when I decided to start doing the podcast, I had to decide whether I was going to hold back what I thought about things or whether I was just going to be completely honest, whatever the topic came up, and I decided that at this point. There's no sense in holding back anything. So when a topic comes up, I say whatever I feel at the moment on that topic.
But I think a good podcast or any type of good communication between ourselves and anybody, whether it's somebody we know or not, out there in podcast land, they're people. Yeah. Those are human beings out there. They get it. They have weaknesses. They have privacy issues. Yeah. They think about stuff when they're about to go to sleep or when they first wake up that they don't want other people to know about. Sure. We're all human beings. Yeah. We all sin. We all have problems. We all have drama. We all hold ourselves back from doing stuff we want to do. That's us. So when you talk into that microphone and you tell people who you are
Yeah.
as a host, they get it. I think that's why Howard Stern is so popular.
Yeah.
Because
Keeps it
he
real,
doesn't
yeah.
hold back.
Yeah.
We don't like half the shit that he says,
Right.
but he
Right.
doesn't hold back. He got everything about his his bowel movements. I don't think we should say that into
Right.
microphones, but at least when people hear that, they're like, "Oh, well, he moves his bowels.
Well,
So do I."
I guess he does say things out loud that other people think.
Yes.
And
Even the perverse things.
yeah. I mean, the human brain, it goes to a bunch of different places, and
Right.
I and the other thing is, anything that I say on any of the podcasts, I don't know how much you can hold me to it, because my opinions change all the time, and I reserve the right to say, well, that's how I thought in January, but
Yeah, I've got a different opinion.
Yeah.
When I talk to my fellow defense attorneys, what something you just said clicked. The guys that have been doing it as long as I have, and much as people who have worked in hospitals and seen some horrible pain and suffering and death and that sort of thing, we think we should have a special unit at Northwood. Northwood is our mental hygiene unit. We should have a little special unit where we go a couple of days a year and just get Paxil and watch ESPN.
Right.
Just to get away for a couple of days,
Yeah.
because we see some very, very, very horrible, perverse behaviors that are demonstrated by human, and cruel behaviors that are demonstrated by union. Anybody that takes a firearm and puts bullets into somebody else for some stupid reason, that's a perversion that we don't understand as normal, everyday people.
Right.
But I get it every day. See?
Yeah.
Firearms, we don't own firearms. We won't own firearms.
Yeah.
But the guys that I represent do, and they don't see a reason why you don't.
Right.
And in fact, if somebody makes you angry, we put one in them.
Yeah.
I don't get that. See, I don't understand. From a personal standpoint,
Sure.
I don't see putting one in somebody.
Yeah.
I might punch you.
Right.
That's how I grew up.
Yeah.
If you knock me out, then I'll be asleep. But you better knock me out. If
Right,
I'm
right.
in a fight, okay. But I'm not going to take a gun and kill you, and I'm not going to take a knife and stab you. I'm going to battle you man to man, person to person.
Yeah.
These guys just take guns almost inhumanly. Almost there's a distance.
Yeah.
It's like these games that these guys play on, on these video games where you're just killing people to get to a goal.
Right.
Kill to get to that goal. So when you get out in the street, what do?
Yeah, there is a certain disconnect from reality in a lot of those things, and it is tough, because I think when it comes to a lot of things, we tend to be disconnected from the actual.
Because it's easy.
It's easy, yeah.
It's easy.
And facing the reality of what it really is incredibly hard at times.
Yes.
So yeah, it is easy, and the opposite is very difficult. So it is the more natural way to go. And
Anyway, I didn't mean to get into that.
No, well,
But anyway,
I'm glad you did.
But that's something I deal with every day. Is this ultra violence that's taking place now in our streets, where we have to close clubs because after 11 o'clock at night, people start pulling their guns out and shooting each other, and then they get to meet me.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. You don't want to meet me professionally. You just want to meet me personally, because I'm a great guy.
Yeah. Outside of work. Yeah,
I'm good.
Or when you don't have to meet you for work, I should say.
Yeah, but then I see my clients sometimes. Well, Claire doesn't go to Kroger with me much anymore, because whenever I go to Kroger,
You run into clients.
what happens?
Yeah.
We run into clients.
Right. Well, I mean, we live in Wheeling. It's a small town.
Yeah.
You're bound to run into people.
Yeah.
What's bad though, James, is sometimes after how many thousands of cases, I remember what they did. I don't remember their names.
Right.
And that's the most horrible part. Is like, hi, Mr. Child sexual molesting.
Right. Yeah.
Versus hi, Mr. Jones. It's
and they remember you because
I did nice work for them.
Yeah.
And I have a good rep it sounds terrible, but I have a very good reputation in our local jails. Because I do work for people. I care about them. I work their cases.
You're not just using it as a stepping stone to become a
become
Judge or
anything except
whatever.
who I am. I like what I am.
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier this evening, you know, people talk about retiring.
Yeah.
I
don't get that either.
I like what I do.
Yeah.
I told you I had lunch with Frank O'Brien, God rest his soul. He was 95 on one of the days I was having lunch with him, and he was in the office that day because he'd lost his wife. His brain was totally intact. You know, he was capable of critical thinking and reading the law. And he says, why wouldn't I go to the office every day? You know, what else do I got? You want me to sit home and watch ESPN? I'm helping people. I have clients. They count on me. They depend on me. Why would I retire? Now, would I like to have a little more time off? Definitely.
Sure.
But, you know, I don't see retiring right now. I love what I do.
My father's been retired. I think it'll be 20 years in May 1st.
God love him.
And I remember him telling me, you know, when he was 67 or so, and that he's more busy now than when he worked, and he's still that way. I think that's why he's made it as long as he has and is as fit as he has, because he didn't just walk out onto the porch and sit in a rocking chair every day. And I don't know that. I guess I look for the day when maybe I get a Social Security check and I don't have to necessarily work.
You don't have to work
to make an income,
right?
But I don't think there'll ever be a day when I don't want to have any responsibilities, or when I don't want to take on something. And
well, what's great about what you're doing with your life is you're creating art, and you're, you know, aside from the fact that you serve the public through the hospital system, you're also coming home every night and thinking about the next movie.
Yeah.
You know, which is great. Yeah. Or the next podcast, what we're going to put out there in the air that maybe people will be interested in listening to and maybe relate to. And Claire comes home and paints.
Yeah.
She's beautiful paintings, gorgeous. People, you know, constantly dunning her to buy her paintings. She does wonderful work with paint. And David's got a beautiful singing voice. People are already, he's a junior in high school, they're talking about giving him scholarships to go and sing at their colleges.
That's awesome.
That's the kind of, you know, I play guitar and sing so that I can stay sane. And people want to pay me to listen to me play while they drink and eat. That's cool. That's, you know, and that's art, and it's beautiful, you know.
Speaking of guitar, I think you had mentioned before we started that you were going to do a song for us, and we're getting about at our mark here.
Oh boy. Sorry we haven't. Yeah, we just kind of went on and on, didn't we?
No, that's exactly what this is all about, and so I think this is a great time to do a song, and
I'm happy to do it. Let me introduce it.
And I want to, and since we'll close with the song.
Okay.
I'll end my part here, but I want to thank you and Claire for dinner.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great conversation, and I'm sure this won't be our first or our last. This is our first, but it won't be our last podcast. And everyone's going to hear that because I don't edit anything.
We have a lot more to talk about.
We have a lot more to talk about. I wish we would have recorded our earlier conversation, but I feel like we could do 5 or 6 more of these without any problems. So
I have such a big ego; it doesn't matter. You just show up.
Plus the pasta was so good that I'll have to come up with an excuse to come back.
We'll do something. We'll do something a little different with pasta next time. But Claire, did you have anything you wanted to say before I start warbling?
It's very, very great privilege to do this.
Well, it's my privilege. Thank you, guys.
She could do a whole show. This one right here.
I would
she's
love
amazing,
to hear
man.
about life on the other side of the pond.
Life on the other side.
Yes. It's a culture that I've always been interested in. So we should definitely think about scheduling a time when we can.
It would be past history, though. She's been here 30. How many years?
That's true.
Claire does get back regularly. Last year she went back with our son and spent some time with her aunt, who's elderly, and we don't have many relatives left. They're falling by the wayside, as we say. We have some cousins left, but we now have grandchildren, which is kind of cool.
I'm sorry, the elder statesman.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're getting there. That's the whole thing. People look at you now, and you're like, well, Mr. Gaudio. Call me Bob. You know. No, you're Mr. Gaudio, and it's okay now.
Yeah,
it's okay. When we were doing the Seven Dwarfs, we did Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at Towngate, and I helped Tim Thompson to direct, and all the dwarfs would call me Mr. Gaudio. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay now. It's, to some extent. I still want to be Bob, but, you know. This song was devised when I was in Yemen. I was missing home. It was Thanksgiving time, my second Thanksgiving away from home, and I was thinking about West Virginia and the lovely hills and the beautiful mountains and the people that I loved, and I took all that whole idea and I turned it into a vision of a woman who you know, was sort of the epitome of West Virginia. So I called it West Virginia Woman. I'll do a little slower version. She descends upon a cloud from the Appalachian Mountain, spirit wild and restless as the old Ohio roll. Her hair is like a satin night in the still life of a forest. Her eyes reflect the glimmer in the vein of blackest coal. Oh, my West Virginia woman, clothed in autumn's many colors, can you see these tears a yearning for the place from which I've roamed? And will you send me mountain music for to soothe me with a memory? Oh, my West Virginia woman, I'm so far, far away from home. Well, from Chester down to Bluefield, o'er the hills and o'er the cities, you can feel her very essence in the melody she played. She strums her gentle fingers across the bosom of the heartland, a simple dulcet rhapsody in thoughts of younger days. Oh, my West Virginia woman, clothed in autumn's many colors, can you see these tears a yearning for the place from which I've roamed? And will you send me mountain music for to soothe me with a memory? Oh, my West Virginia woman, I'm so far away from home. Well, the lakes and the rivers send their greetings as they gurgle neath her feet. Farms and coal mines sing her praises, every orchard, every street. Harper's Ferry west to Wheeling, you can hear her proud decree. Here in West by God, Virginia, mountaineers are always free. Yeehaw. Oh, my West Virginia woman, clothed in autumn's many colors, can you see these tears a yearning for the place from which I've roamed? And will you send me mountain music for to soothe me with a memory? Oh, my West Virginia woman, I'm so far, far away from home. Oh, my West Virginia woman, I'm so far away from home. West Virginia woman. Thanks, man. That was fun.
That was great. Thank you very much.
That was good. I did okay.
You did great. You did great.
Thanks.
Everybody, until the next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see ya.
Bye-bye.